Hello and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to lay a strong foundation for health and happiness in our teenage girls. My name is Edwina Murphy-Droomer and today's interview is with Robyn Treyvaud. Robyn is an internationally recognised expert in online safety. As the founder of CyberSafe Kids, Robyn established a global organisation and network that assists educators, schools and local communities in understanding and overcoming the challenges of the digital world. Robyn is now the head of education at Wangle Family Insites, a cyber safety platform which incorporates an app that pioneers a new approach to cyber safety, which is focused on education and empowerment. Thank you so much for being with us, Robyn.
Pleasure.
I think to start today's interview, I'd really like to look at what I know are some of the really pressing things that we as mums are concerned about, and that's helping our teens manage their privacy, first and foremost, relationships, online relationships, and their reputations, because this is becoming more and more. You know, we hear now that, you know, our girls are going for their first jobs and that employees, the first thing they do is type the name into Google and see what pops up. And many people might be quite alarmed at what actually does pop up when we think we're just sharing it with our friends. It might actually be going further. So can we, first of all, you know, what is privacy and why does it matter? How should we be looking at this?
Oh, look, I think privacy has taken on different sort of definitions in the age of the internet,
yeah.
And I think part of it is that when the internet first sort of came into fruition, you know, people just were oversharing. Because they didn't realise just how important your privacy is. So the fact that you could share and overshare is something that was adopted in the very early days, both by, you know, teens and also adults. And I think we've come to understand now that our privacy is a very precious commodity, and that we should be doing everything that we can to protect it. So sometimes you have to protect your personal identifying information. Sometimes you have to protect and keep private the content that you deliver or create with other people. And I think, you know, just recently, you know, we've had the whole issue of data becoming available through Facebook, you know, and Facebook accounts and other social media platforms don't necessarily have as their business model protecting our privacy. They actually, that doesn't fall into their remit. Basically, they sell on our data to third parties, and that's where they basically get their revenue, you know, through advertising and everything else. So if you would take Facebook, and so for example, we're using a platform that I hadn't used before, and now in my emails and in my Facebook accounts, Zoom is coming up all the time. Mm-hmm. So unless Google was picking up keywords in my communications, then how come this is all happening? You know, similarly, I bought some Mojave slippers, and then every time I went on Facebook, there was a Mojave slipper advertisement. So we leak our personal private data in ways that we just don't understand.
Yeah.
Now, if as a mother, and I'm now a grandmother, so I have the same conversations, but just with younger children, is that you need to help them understand the implications of privacy settings in any of the platforms that they use. Now, that becomes complex, if you like, because most kids, most of the time, want to have as many friends as they possibly can. So often they'll set their privacy settings to public. And that is clearly not what we want them to do. So I think it's really important that we have conversations, not about make sure your privacy settings are set to private. It's like, what do we need to understand and what do we need to do to keep your personal information as private as it can possibly be, and use it as an opportunity to have a conversation, negotiate, sit in front of the computer. You know, I always say to parents, if you want to see, if your children tell you that, oh, it's okay, I get all of that and I've done it, I think parents have the right and the responsibility sometimes to say, you know what, I want you to show me. I want you to show me your privacy settings on Facebook or Instagram, and let's have a conversation about that. So it's sometimes we've got to be proactive rather than reactive around these things. And I think really we, the parents, need to understand the implications of privacy settings ourselves before we have a conversation with our kids, because they often think you're so clueless, you don't know what you're talking about. So I would sort of, my recommendation to parents is find out what you need to know about privacy first for yourselves, and then have the conversation with your children.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that, you know, often when you go to download an app or something for your phone, you have to agree to terms and conditions. And so often it says you have to, you know, do you agree to give access to your photos, your, you know, private, your friends list, the whole gamut. And you think, well, you know, it's just a flashlight.
Right.
So I think that's another one where we often get caught out.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think the issue with you know, Facebook and data being accessed by Cambridge Analytica, which is a global, like that's a seriously global issue, that companies, you know, because basically they could have turned the election on the basis of access to personal identifying information on Facebook. So it's not just in families that we have this problem. And my other word of advice is don't trust social media platforms to look after your personal information, because they just don't care.
Yeah. Well, it's they want to collect it so that they can use it.
Yeah, it's a currency. Yeah.
So how do we look at managing breaches in privacy? So, you know, to take it a step further and we've missed something and there has been a breach in privacy, you know, whether people have got hold of passwords or different things, what's that next sort of step?
Look, I think what I do find very concerning is that all the wonderful advice that's made available from the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner or Scamwatch or any of the government agencies, that's where you make your report. Now, within the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, if you go to their reporting mechanism, it's not just used for bullying, it actually can be used for privacy breaches. And they can, I was actually at a meeting with them last week, and they've formed partnerships with social media platforms so that if a parent makes a report on behalf of a child, or the child does it for themselves, there is a process that you go through, and then they will, if they think it sort of meets their criteria, they can then negotiate on your behalf to either have content taken down. You know, let's say it's a breach and there are all these photos out there of your child and you want them taken down, and you've made a report to Facebook or Instagram and nothing happens. Well, you can then go to the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, go through their reporting mechanism, and then they will work on your behalf with that social media platform. And it's amazing what they can do, and no one knows that they've got that capacity. And I think we've got to get the word out there.
Is that a free service, Robyn?
Yep. Totally free. Yep, totally free. And I would add to that, it's not just privacy. So, for example, they had a training session with parents recently, and they were talking about how within 20 hours they could have inappropriate content taken down about a young user. And a mother sort of said at the time, oh, if I'd only known that 6 months ago when I really needed it, because I went to the police and the police said, oh, we can't do anything about that. And I think, you know, it's not necessarily their fault, but they haven't been informed about the functions of the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. So I think, you know, it's worth having a look at where it is, what it requires you to do, like take a screenshot, put down the URL, put down a time, all of those sorts of things. Then you fill out the report. You know, have a look at it before you actually find yourself in a crisis.
Yeah.
Make sure you've bookmarked it, so again you don't have to go looking when you're feeling very stressed.
I think that sounds like a very valuable resource. What we might do is actually pop a link to that under the video so people can copy and paste it and they've got it.
Yeah.
So I'll get that. I'll try and remember to do that.
No, I can send you the link. But I think also ScamWatch is very good. It's, again, another government agency. Yeah. And I think our federal government does very well in making information around cybersecurity, which is what this is about, and cyberbullying and all of the other sort of inappropriate content. So it could be there's pornographic content there, all sorts of things that you can actually find out more about it, but also you can do something about it with their help.
It sounds to me like this would be a fantastic conversation to have with our girls, because often I think there's many girls that won't actually tell mum or dad because they feel ashamed or embarrassed, or they don't want to get in trouble, or something's happened. And so if they know that they can use this resource as well, it just gives them another tool.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the legal and non-legal consequences of sharing what we now call sexting. So the, sexualized images, text, videos, this is another big conversation that is happening with us mums at the moment, because it just seems to be growing very rapidly and being normalized as something that kids just do. And I've been quite alarmed at the almost the acceptance of it from adults in the community that go, well, that's just what kids do now. But I think that the consequences are so great that we need to perhaps look at it with a bit more concern.
Yes. And look, I think it's more complex than just talking about teens sharing hot pics or nude pics, etc. I think we have to sort of dig a little deeper to find out why it's become normalised, if it has become normalised. And my feeling is that it has for certain age groups. They talk more now about image-based abuse, because it's not just adolescents that are getting involved in these sorts of incidents, it's actually adults as well. Yeah. So, whether you use the label sexting or whatever, it's all part of the same thing. Now, what has become the currency at the moment is that the hotter you look on Instagram, so if you take a selfie, I've had girls say to me, the more skin you show, the more likes you get. Yeah. So if the like is now the symbol of validation, and the validation is all about how you look, then our young daughters are growing up thinking that the only thing that really matters is how I present myself as having a perfect life, looking perfect, and going through a whole range of processes to get to that point. And then you get to the point where, they have their relationships with boys, they start off as friendships, then they can become highly sexual really quickly. Yeah. And in the report that I was reading this morning, it was sort of, the girls were actually saying that they often get the random requests, the anonymous request, to send a nude for nude. So you take a nude and I'll take one too. Or sometimes the girls just get an image of male anatomy and then go, and you can do the same for me. Yeah. So if part of what you want to do is become accepted and popular, and the currency is how hot you are, you can see that this becomes quite toxic. Yeah. Very toxic. Yeah. Now, the reality is that depending on the age of the young people who are involved in these incidents, in most states, not so much in Victoria now, but they could be charged with producing and or distributing child pornography. And for some kids, who are growing up thinking that this is normal, just have a look at the media around them in terms of the songs they listen to, the videos, everything is highly sexualised. Yeah. Therefore, the leap into either taking homemade images of myself in a highly sexual sort of way it's sort of like, well, isn't that what girls do?
Yeah.
And a lot of I also find the older girls are getting a lot savvier about how they do that. They either just ignore them, or they'll take a little photo of a nude palette eyeshadow, for example. There's an app you can get which actually provides you with images with a little message. So one of the messages might be, no, I'm not going to do that, but look, I'll show Dad and then see how he responds. So, some very humorous, but it's sort of like, don't muck around with me because I'm just not going to get involved in this.
Yeah.
That's the random ones. Then you've got, as they get older and they do have, sexual relationships, and, we know that those are happening earlier than perhaps sort of previous generations. Then as part of that relationship, there is that intimate sharing of images, which totally consensual on both parties. Where it becomes problematic is if that relationship breaks down.
Yeah.
So you've got the bragging rights, you've got the revenge, you've got the images of the girl usually being go viral. And then it becomes a serious psychological issue and humiliating. A lot of times the girls initially won't share with a parent or someone at school, but their friends know about it. So not only do we have to empower mothers and parents, we've actually, if you're a bystander to either a bullying or a cyberbullying or a digital drama or sharing of these images and you know about it, then you need to speak up. We need to empower our daughters to speak up when they see someone's being hurt or harmed and they've lost control over the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think if they can have these conversations with each other.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the ways in which some parents, you've got to remember that the social media platforms that kids are using these days are very interactive. The feedback that they get to the images that they take and share, just let's say on Instagram, the feedback is instantaneous, and in many cases it's unfiltered. So that means that if you've got a whole lot of friends and followers on your Instagram account and you post and you think you look pretty hot and pretty cool you cannot predict what sort of feedback you're going to get.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hear a lot is that the more selfies you take, the more try-hard you become in the eyes of other girls. There is the optimum time for sharing images sort of in Instagram. And that is, between 4:30 and 8:30 on a weeknight and Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights at the weekend. You don't get 100 likes within half an hour to an hour, delete the photo, try again another time. And you can see how the self-worth is starting to be eroded because of it.
Yeah. It's such an enormous issue because I know I see it in our house, but I find it very difficult to know how to start turning that around, because absolutely everything that happens outside our home supports the idea of the need to be sexually attractive. And this starts with when you go to buy the first training bra and you can't buy one that's not padded.
Yes.
And you can't buy shorts that go halfway down the thigh because they just almost don't exist. And so the shops don't support us trying to come up with something different. But even if they were there, to be honest, I don't think the girls would wear them, because that's not what everyone else is wearing, because they want to fit in. Everybody from the beginning of time, we want to fit in as teenagers. So it's very, very difficult. We're in an enormously difficult era to try and turn that messaging around.
I would agree with that. And I think it's really important. And I hear parents say all the time that trying to manage smartphones and social media accounts has changed the family dynamic. So parents feel quite powerless in many respects. In some cases, they feel that all they're doing is policing screen time, that they're sort of talking a lot about data usage. Oh, you've gone over the limit for data and that's going to cost that amount of money. How are we going to manage that? Yeah. They talk a lot about managing privacy settings, photographs posted to sites, and the other one was the apps that are downloaded. Yeah. So family life and the dynamics of family life have been altered dramatically by the introduction of smartphones and social media. Yeah. So what I always encourage parents to do is to develop your own little network of support, people that you know and trust and respect. Yeah. And you're not doing this on your own. Every other family is dealing with this. But we sort of feel we can't reveal to the world that we're really struggling with devices and everything else. And I think it's really important that we do find informal and formal networks of support. I don't think, I mean, as an educator and as a head of a school, we did everything we could to empower and educate parents, but you just can't keep doing it. It's expensive if you're bringing in outside experts, you don't have the in-house expertise, and you're getting the parents that are doing all the right things most of the time, and then the ones you really want to be there don't come. And I understand, family life is very busy, and coming out on a Wednesday night at 7:30 isn't viable. So I think we've got to get creative in how we do help mothers. And, by default, obviously, parents and families. I think having conversations with each other about that, there's some good books out there around this. There's some very good medical sort of, psychs and everybody else who've got amazing information online that people just don't know it exists. Yeah. So we've got to find mechanisms to do that. Yeah. I would start, if I were starting from scratch, there are two resources I highly recommend parents go to. The first one is commonsensemedia.org, where they've got a section there in the parent portal for ratings and reviews of apps. So that applies to little people and older ones as well. They've got all the issues that families are dealing with and practical advice. There are videos. There's absolutely everything. Now, the fact that it's American doesn't sort of alter the fact that most of the social media apps and everything else that they're doing and using comes from America anyway. Yeah. So I think that would be the first place I would send to parents. That's the one-stop shop for parents. Yeah. It is concerning that we've got in two studies, one Australian, one American, only 60% of parents aren't monitoring what their children are doing online. Yeah. About anything. They're not even having a conversation. They're not sitting down and asking, what do you find so cool about social media, about Instagram, all of those sorts of things we need to be talking about, because if we're not and parents are disengaged, that's when kids fall through the cracks, unfortunately. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of conversations around the dinner table. It's amazing what comes up,
And the car's the best place. You don't have to look at each other.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the next sort of section on my list was that like and the likes and the selfies, and we've really covered that. But, I just want to reiterate that I think, whilst it may or may not change some of the behaviours, it's so important, I believe, to be having the conversations. I think as mums, it's, often these conversations can go around and around our heads, and it's like, I don't know the perfect thing to say, and I'm not sure, and it seems like that's what everyone else is doing. But I'm just such a big fan of having those conversations out loud and saying, well, what does it really mean? I know that I scroll past lots of pictures that I think are great, but I don't press like on all of them. It doesn't mean I don't like them. And, just having those kind of conversations, there's so much power in that, I think.
And look, I think, you know, we sometimes, because we're so busy, we miss the teachable moments in our lives. So body dissatisfaction is becoming an increasingly big issue in the lives of girls, especially today, and it's starting much younger than we anticipated. You know, I was having conversations like this around body image and social media, you know, when girls were 13. Well, now we've got to have the discussions with them when they're about 8 or 9. So I think I take your point that having those just-in-time conversations is really important. I also think that, and there are findings that have been published, that the more we help our children become critical consumers of media, the less likely they are to sort of fall into the trap of, oh, she looks so beautiful, or that celebrity looks amazing, I wish I was thinner, fatter, like whatever it is, because they're not being taught critical media literacy.
Yeah.
So I think where parents can be really helpful is to look for those moments. Even if you're in, let's say you're in a shop and you're looking at clothes and you find something, as I've done before, I found something for an 8-year-old girl, and I'm thinking that looks like it looks like a cocktail outfit, you know, and it's almost like a version of a 21-year-old's dress that they'd wear to a cocktail party or a bar. Now, that's a teachable moment. But if you've got your daughter with you when you're shopping, you can look and say, whoa, that's highly sexual, and it's okay to use that word because the kids use it all the time. That's highly inappropriate, do you think, or not? Do you think it's okay for a 6-year-old to be wearing messages about, you know, I'm hot and whatever it might be, hot babe, you know, all of those sorts of things? They're those teachable moments when we are subliminally consuming messages about what women and girls should be and should be like and how they should behave. Yeah, I think that that's a really important thing that we often miss those.
I remember watching, and now the name of it's going to go out of my head. It was a documentary that they did on the ABC, and they were looking at our consumerism that is happening currently, and they did a whole segment on teenage girls and fashion and how they will buy an outfit, and if they're photographed in that outfit on Instagram, they can actually never wear it again. It gets thrown out and they've got to find something else. They can't be seen in the same thing twice. And I just, you know, the flow-on effects of all this idea around the importance of how we look is just, it's so widespread, isn't it?
It is. And I think there's another element to social media use. So we know, for example, and I'm talking specifically about girls here, so we know that social media is the greatest connector that girls have ever had. So being connected to their friends, talking to friends, being part of group conversations, meeting new people. Like, it's more likely that girls will meet new friends, make new friends online than they will in real life. And boys will actually make new friends in their gaming platforms rather than girls. The thing, though, that drives an almost obsessive use of social media is the fear of missing out, FOMO. So you'll hear FOMO talked about a lot. So it's very difficult to sort of try and rein in the amount of screen time and social media use girls have. They're often doing it at the same time they're doing their homework. And we do know that sort of that multitasking has a very negative effect on learning. And so why are they using social media and their smartphones when they're doing their homework? Fear of missing out. Or they want to see who else has been posting photos and pictures that they can provide feedback to on Instagram. I read recently where one of the criteria for being a good friend is how many streaks you have. So a streak is how many days or hours that you keep in touch. So we've got all of these sorts of pressures being put on our children. And I think, there are some parents, quite rightly, who say, look, if you're going to have a social media account, I want to be on it. I need to be on that network. Now, we've got the sacrificial account where adults and everybody else are. And then we've got the other one, which is the real me.
Yeah.
So,
often far more than two, quite often.
Yes, exactly right. So I'm not for a minute making judgments on families not being able to sort of keep up with what's going on, because every week, every month, there's a new app. There's new trends that we're seeing. There is a trend around addictive type behaviours to do with social media usage as well as gaming. And smartphone use, so that notion of I've always got to have it with me, it's got to be by the bed, all of those sorts of things, they actually impact significantly on health and well-being.
Yeah. The inability to ever just stop.
Parents are modelling the behaviours that they actually don't really want to see in their children. But often they miss the fact that, well, I'm wondering where they're learning that from. So I think we have to be very aware of our own behaviours and our own practices, and have the conversations to say, look, I haven't got this completely right either, but let's work together to see if we can actually manage media better in our lives, and we'll do it together as a family.
Yeah. I think I want to just reiterate that golden point that we don't have to know it all. We don't have to be getting it right all the time, because I know myself, I sort of had this, because a lot of my work is online, and I made this grand commitment. I get up at 5:30 so that in the morning to get work done, so that I can turn my computer off at 3:00 in the afternoon when the kids are getting home from school. And that is my intention, and it often happens, but it also often I catch myself just needing to do just one more, and it drives me nuts when I say to the kids, it's dinner, and they're just like, just 5 minutes, and I think, it sounds like me.
No, that's right. So I think the more insights we have about our own behaviours and use of media and, phones especially, and I think it is very hard for kids to basically, well, they can't go cold turkey. That's the first thing that you need to do, because they run the risk, or you run the risk, of your children sort of being isolated and excluded and all of those sorts of things. So it's about finding the balance.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that that's easy, but I think that's got to be one of our goals.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we touched on the advertising a bit earlier, but how do I saw in one of your articles on the Cyber Safe Kids talking about how marketers actually monetize likes. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, different ways to do that. You described the situation where a girl wore a certain outfit and then can't wear it again.
Yeah.
So what you have, there are a number of things that you can do. So if you're promoting a product, then that's how, and then it's liked, then Coca-Cola or whatever it might be, there are benefits for you doing that. People can also buy likes. Yeah. So it is a currency. It's not just sort of, I think she looks gorgeous or whatever. It is actually a currency. Yeah. And there are Instagram celebrities who have made millions by setting themselves up to promote a product, and then put themselves out there, get as many likes as they can, and then you've now got a business model. So monetizing likes is pretty much around that sort of phenomena. Now, that's not going to apply to the sort of the average kid, but I think we have to be aware of that. And if you look at who your daughter follows on Instagram, you will find some celebrities that are monetizing their accounts and also the likes that they get.
Yeah. Yeah, and make enormous money. My goodness, the money that some of the YouTubers and things seem to make is quite phenomenal.
It is, absolutely. Yeah.
Robyn, I'm intrigued. You were a teacher, you've been a headmistress as well. And, I'm curious what actually evolved to get you to be doing the work that you're doing. Was it through trends that you were seeing in children?
That's the leading question. It started off in the early 90s when the internet had really just sort of evolved into, a place and space where people could connect and communicate and create. And I left the public sector to go to a private school in Melbourne because it was the second school that had offered a one-to-one program. So from year 5 onwards, the kids all they were like bricks, they were humongous, but they all had these devices, which was unheard of. Yep. Now I noticed the reason why I decided to go there was I wanted to see how the internet and technology was going to impact on teaching and learning. I also had a suspicion that as more and more kids went online, and they were using Yahoo Messenger, they were using Neopets, and they were communicating and collaborating and hanging out with each other online. Very early days, like dial-up modems and all of that stuff. But what was happening, I noticed very quickly, was that the next morning they were all talking about what happened last night. So it was the very early days of email. And things were happening around, things were being said in an email or in a message which were totally misconstrued, misunderstood, and caused a rift in a friendship. So I picked that up really quickly, and then I used to act upon it pretty quickly as well. So we'd have conversations and we'd talk about, well, what's the appropriate way to talk to people? Do we do it the same when we're online or offline? So I'm talking a long time ago. So then I used to be the go-to person if there were issues with kids doing silly things online. It would be, Rob, could you come and sort it out, please? Because you're the only one that has any understanding of what's going on. I used to, when I was doing yard duty, I felt like the Pied Piper because I was genuinely interested in what the kids were doing, what they were thinking, what they were talking about. And so I used to try and do yard duty at least once a day, if I could, because that was the only way I could find out what was going on. Yep. And so I then, over the years, I left the school environment, but I was working in schools both internationally and here. And it started off working with teachers, but also with parents. And then, at different stages, I would work. I'd run workshops with parents, bring your child as well. So BYOK, bring your own kid. And so it's not a job for me. I'm just passionate about it. And I love technology for myself. I love the way it can transform society and humanity, but I'm not deluded in any shape or form about how it can be used negatively and for ill. So I try, and that's sort of my mantra, which is, we all hopefully leave the planet a better place than when we arrived. And I guess that's what I do. Yeah. So now I'm working as head of education at Wangle Family Insites, where we publish ebooks. Yeah. We have an app, as you mentioned earlier, to help parents receive a notification if something happens. It's an internet alert that's been developed by researchers, and if that's triggered, then the parents get a notification to their device. And then I've written, what do you need to know about this type of incident? What can you say? What can you do? And here are more resources. So instead of blocking or banning, which is what a lot of parental control software solutions are about, we're actually about negotiation and having conversations. So that's the role I play, which is not all that different to what I've been doing for a number of years now, over a decade. But I think my potential audience is greater and I can have a greater impact.
I love the sound of that app, the whole idea that it's more about empowerment and conversation than just banning, because I know what happens when I ban stuff in this house. It's just, it never works. It just doesn't work. And I think that's, that's just human nature. As soon as you can't have something, that's all you want.
And look, and the ideal scenario would be that you wouldn't, I mean, there are more than 20 internet threats. So it could be excessive time, inappropriate content, a number of different, uploads, downloads, for example, and they would be triggered through our network. And then the parents would then receive the notification. So as well as the notification in real time, so instead of there being a time lag, you can now have the conversation in real time. But there's also a dashboard so that parents can see how much time their children have been online, what was the most, what was the most used app or website or whatever. So it's not just about tripping kids up when they do something wrong, because they're trying to self-regulate themselves anyway. But I think the power of it, and I notice this in schools, when kids know that their online behaviour or just the use of their computer is being monitored, it moderates the behaviour.
Yeah.
So as they start to develop self-regulatory strategies, this actually helps them, because they go, oh, well, I know because mum and dad have put it on my phone or on my iPad. So I know that they know. Therefore, I won't go to a pornography site, or I won't do this or I won't do that, or I will do this and I will do that. So I think what it does is it opens the door to deeper conversations, more relevant and current, which right now I think parents are crying out for, because they just don't know what to talk about.
Yep. I think that sounds wonderful. I'll be having a look.
Yeah,
Robyn, our time has run out, and as always, I just can't believe that time goes so fast. This has been a fantastic conversation. Just before we wind up, I know that you have several gifts for our audience. Could you just tell them about that briefly before we go?
Yes, well, if you go to Wangle, so it's not Wrangle, it's Wangle, WANGLE, Family Insites, INSITES.com. That's all one word, wanglefamilyinsites.com. If you go into that site, there's a 30-day trial of the app, which you can sort of see how that this works in your family. We've got lots and lots of articles in there, and we've got ebooks, which are free downloads. So I'll share with you, Edwina, where people can go. So we've got one on cyber safety with the whole range of issues around cyber safety. We've got one specifically around cyberbullying, a practical guide for parents. We've just published one called Social Media and the Impact on Young Minds, which is pretty much what we've been talking about today. And they're practical, they're easy to read, you can dip in and out of them. And I just think sometimes we need to feel that, oh, yes, I think there's something in there. Maybe I need to read that, and that'll help me. So, between the ebooks, the advice, if you go to the menu and look at advice, once a month, 8 times a month, we publish information for parents about this. So I think between us and Common Sense Media, we pretty much nailed what parents need to know without overwhelming them.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And yes, I don't doubt that that we'll have another conversation in the future, because this has been, it's just so helpful. It's fantastic.
Okay.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.